My wife texted my best friend. Husband's on a business trip. I'm all alone at home. Come over. I came home early and found them in my bedroom. What happened next changed all our lives forever. Hello everyone. If you're subscribed, let's dive right into this story. This tale will absolutely infuriate you. But don't worry, justice will be served in the end. Ready? Let's begin. Don't forget to hit that like button. I absolutely love reading your amazing comments. I'm David, 35 years old, and I work as a regional sales manager for a manufacturing company based in Denver. This story involves my wife Jessica, who's 32 and works part-time as a yoga instructor, and my best friend since college, Mark, who's 34 and works in IT consulting. Jessica and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, dated for 4 years, and got married right after graduation. For the most part, our marriage had been solid. We owned a nice house in the suburbs, had talked about starting a family soon, and seemed to have built a good life together. Mark has been my closest friend for over 15 years. We were roommates in college, stood up at each other's weddings, and maintained our friendship even though he lived about 2 hours away in Colorado Springs. He'd visit us maybe once a month, and we'd text or call regularly. Jessica always seemed to get along well with Mark, which I appreciated since some wives don't like their husbands' close friendships. Looking back now, maybe I should have noticed that they got along a little too well. My job requires me to travel about twice a month for client meetings and trade shows. These trips are usually 2-3 days, sometimes longer for major conferences. Jessica had never complained about my travel schedule. In fact, she often seemed to enjoy having the house to herself, saying it gave her time to catch up on projects or have girls' nights with her friends. What I didn't realize was that my business trips had become opportunities for something much more sinister. Last month, I had a scheduled trip to Phoenix for a 3-day industry conference. It was a big event for our company, and I'd been planning to attend for months. Jessica knew about it well in advance, as did Mark, since we'd talked about him maybe visiting Denver while I was away. The conference was scheduled for Tuesday through Thursday, and I was supposed to fly out Monday evening and return Friday morning. It was a routine trip, the kind I'd taken dozens of times before. On Monday afternoon, I was at the office finishing up last-minute preparations when my phone started buzzing with what seemed like urgent messages from Jessica. Have a safe flight tonight. I'll miss you. The house is going to feel so empty without you. Wish you weren't going to be gone so long. At the time, I thought it was sweet that she was being so affectionate about my trip. Usually, Jessica was more matter-of-fact about my travel. A quick have a safe trip text and that was it. But I figured maybe she was just feeling particularly loving that day. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Hey man, safe travels to Phoenix. Catch up when you get back. Again, nothing unusual. Mark often checked in when he knew I was traveling. But then about an hour later, I got a call from my biggest client in Phoenix. David, I'm really sorry but we need to postpone our meetings. I just found out my father-in-law had a heart attack, and I need to fly to Seattle tonight to be with my family. This client represented about 40% of the business I was supposed to conduct at the conference. Without those meetings, there wasn't much point in me attending. I called my boss and explained the situation. He agreed that I should postpone the trip and try to reschedule the meetings for the following week. So instead of flying to Phoenix that evening, I decided to head home and surprise Jessica. I figured we could have a nice evening together, maybe go out to dinner to celebrate the unexpected time off. I didn't call ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise. I got home around 6:30 p.m., about 2 hours after I was supposed to have left for the airport. Jessica's car was in the driveway, which was expected, but there was also a car parked on the street that looked familiar. It took me a moment to realize it was Mark's car. My first thought was that maybe Mark had come to visit Jessica while I was away, which seemed a little odd but not necessarily alarming. Maybe he'd wanted to check on her, or had been in Denver for work. I used my key to enter through the front door, calling out, "Hey, I'm home," as I walked in. No response. The living room was empty, but I could hear music playing softly from upstairs. I called out again, louder this time. "Jessica? Mark?" Still no response. I started walking up the stairs, and that's when I heard other sounds. Sounds that made my stomach drop and my heart start racing. I reached the top of the stairs and could hear the sounds more clearly now. They were coming from our bedroom. The door was closed, but the sounds were unmistakable. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was hearing. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to pretend I hadn't come home, to preserve the illusion that everything was normal. But I couldn't. I had to know. I quietly walked to the bedroom door and slowly turned the handle. What I saw when I opened that door will be burned into my memory forever. Jessica and Mark were in our bed, the bed Jessica and I had shared for 8 years, the bed we'd bought together when we first moved into this house. For a split second, nobody moved. Mark was on top of Jessica, and they were both completely naked. The shock on their faces was immediate and total. "Oh my God," Jessica gasped, scrambling to pull the sheets up to cover herself. Mark literally fell off the bed in his panic, landing on the floor with a loud thud. "David," he said, his voice shaking, "I can explain. I just stood there taking in the scene. Our bedroom, which had always been our private sanctuary, felt violated and foreign. There were clothes scattered across the floor, Jessica's dress, Mark's jeans and shirt, his shoes kicked carelessly aside. "Explain what?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm given the chaos in my head. We weren't," Jessica started, but couldn't finish the sentence. "You weren't what? Having sex in my bed while you thought I was in Phoenix?" Mark was frantically trying to put his boxers on while still sitting on the floor. "David, please, let me explain. I'm listening." Jessica had wrapped herself in our comforter and was sitting up in bed, tears starting to flow down her face. "David, I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. A huge mistake." "How long?" I asked. "What? How long has this been going on?" Jessica and Mark looked at each other, and in that moment, I saw a communication between them that told me this wasn't their first time together. "David?" Mark started. "How long?" "6 months," Jessica whispered. 6 months. Half a year. While I'd been traveling for work, coming home to kiss my wife and hang out with my best friend, they'd been carrying on an affair behind my back. Every time I traveled, Jessica nodded, unable to look at me. As I stood there processing this information, more pieces started falling into place. Jessica's enthusiasm about my trips, Mark's convenient visits to Denver that always seemed to coincide with my travel schedule, the way they'd both been so supportive of my career advancement, which required more travel. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been actively encouraging situations that would give them more opportunities to be together. "The conference in Chicago 2 months ago," I said, when I extended my trip by 2 days for additional meetings. "David, please," Jessica said. "Mark, you told me you were in Denver that week for a client project." Mark couldn't look at me. "Yes, and last month, when I went to Seattle." "Jessica, you said you were going to your sister's for the weekend." "I did go to my sister's," she said quietly. With Mark, silence. "Jesus Christ," I said, finally feeling the anger starting to build. "You took him to meet your family?" "It wasn't like that," Jessica said quickly. We were together, and I had already committed to visiting Sarah, so you brought your affair partner to family dinner." The scope of their betrayal was becoming clearer. This wasn't just physical cheating. They'd been building a relationship, making plans, involving other people in their deception. Mark finally stood up, having managed to put his clothes back on. "David, I need you to know that this was never supposed to happen. But it did happen. For 6 months. It started innocently," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. "Mark came to visit when you were in Atlanta, just to check on me, because you'd mentioned I was feeling lonely with all your travel. And we had dinner, we were talking, and," she trailed off, "and you decided to sleep together." "It wasn't planned," Mark said. "We'd been drinking. We were talking about relationships, about how hard it is when you're apart so much. So you thought you'd help Jessica with her loneliness problem." "David, it's not his fault," Jessica said quickly. "I initiated it. I kissed him first. I looked at both of them, my wife of 8 years, and my best friend of 15 years, trying to figure out how I'd ended up in this situation. So after that first time, we developed feelings for each other." Feelings. They developed feelings. This wasn't just about sex or loneliness or a moment of weakness. They'd fallen in love with each other while lying to me for 6 months. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, panic in her voice. "Documenting this conversation." "David, you can't." "I can't what? Record my wife and best friend admitting to a 6-month affair in my own bedroom?" Mark stepped toward me. "Come on, man. Don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Protect myself, because clearly I can't trust either of you to tell me the truth." I kept recording as I asked more questions. How many times had they been together? Too many to count. Had they used protection? Sometimes. Had they discussed leaving me? They'd talked about it. Had anyone else known? Jessica's sister suspected. With each answer, the betrayal got deeper. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a full-blown relationship that they'd been hiding while maintaining their relationships with me. After about 10 minutes of this interrogation, I stopped recording and put my phone away. "I want both of you out of my house, now." "David, please," Jessica said. "We need to talk about this. We need to figure out what happens next." "What happens next is you leave. Both of you. This is my house too," Jessica said. "You can't just kick me out. Watch me." Mark was already gathering the rest of his clothes. "David, I know you hate me right now, but I don't hate you, Mark. I'm done with you. There's a difference." Jessica was crying harder now. "Where am I supposed to go? Figure it out together. You've been doing that behind my back for 6 months. Now you can do it openly." "David, please. I love you. This thing with Mark, it's complicated." "No, Jessica, it's not complicated. You chose to cheat on me with my best friend for 6 months. You chose to lie to me every single day. You chose to plan your affair around my work schedule. There's nothing complicated about that." They both left that night. Jessica packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. Mark drove back to Colorado Springs with his tail between his legs. Over the next few days, both of them tried calling and texting me constantly. Jessica wanted to work things out and go to marriage counseling. Mark wanted to apologize and explain his side of things. I ignored them both. Instead, I spent that week consulting with a divorce attorney and beginning the process of ending my marriage. The recording I'd made of their confession became crucial evidence in the divorce proceedings. Jessica tried fighting the divorce initially, claiming she wanted to save our marriage and that the affair was over. But the recording made it clear that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a sustained betrayal involving deep feelings and future planning. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Because of the evidence of Jessica's affair, I was able to keep the house and most of our assets. Jessica had to find her own place and start over financially. Mark lost his job about 6 months after the affair was exposed.
Word had gotten around his professional network about what he'd done, and apparently his reputation as someone who couldn't be trusted personally extended to concerns about his professional reliability. Jessica and Mark tried to make a relationship work after everything came out, but it didn't last. Turns out that a relationship built on deception and betrayal isn't particularly stable when it's forced into the light. Jessica moved back to her hometown about a year after our divorce. Mark moved to another state entirely, trying to start fresh somewhere his reputation hadn't followed him. Looking back, I realized there were signs I missed or chose to ignore. Jessica's enthusiasm about my travel, Mark's convenient availability whenever I was out of town. The way they seemed so comfortable together, finishing each other's sentences and sharing inside jokes, but I trusted them both completely, which made their betrayal possible. The recording I made that night wasn't about revenge, it was about protecting myself and ensuring that the truth came out. Without that evidence, it might have become a he said she said situation where Jessica could have painted me as the bad guy who refused to work on our marriage. Coming home early that day was the worst and best thing that could have happened. Worst because I had to see the betrayal with my own eyes. Best because I finally learned the truth about the people I'd trusted most in the world. Sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the deepest betrayals. But sometimes catching them in the act is exactly what you need to free yourself from a life built on lies. Have you ever discovered a betrayal that completely changed your perspective on someone? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the truth really does set you free. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about trust, betrayal, and the strength it takes to start over.